time immemorial, wars have engulfed the land, shattering peace and destroying everything in their path. For centuries, humanity has witnessed countless conflicts, plunging into the darkness of death and devastation. Each war left its mark on the world, imprinting upon the fate of people and embodying impending apocalyptic events. But in the shadows of this chaos, something even more powerful and dreadful lurked. The Four Horsemen of the apocalypse observed the wars. They were the embodiment of them, steadily approaching their purpose. Terrifying creatures transcending reality, they were sent into the world to bring punishment and destruction. The first rider, Plague, his pervasive presence burdened the air, transforming life into ashes. His toxic breath was a dreadful gust of death that, when inhaled by the unfortunate, filled them with agonizing coughs and hopelessness. Brown eyes, filled with ominous light, seemed like windows to hell through which he penetrated the souls of people, turning them into weak and tormented beings. Wherever the rider treaded, apathy and despair reigned. Healthy individuals turned into pale shadows with gaunt faces, their skin covered in ulcers, their hearts engulfed in profound melancholy. Many fell weak to the ground, tormented by suffering, silently succumbing to death, becoming fodder for the mighty pestilence. People attempted to avoid him, locking themselves in their homes, but in vain. His poisonous mist seeped through cracks in windows and doors, leaving no corner to hide. Any attempts at resistance were futile, as pestilence was a silent killer, invisible and elusive like a ghost, cursing the world of the living. In essence, pestilence was a symbol of destruction and corruption. He carried with him a horrifying reminder of the fragility of life and helplessness in the face of natural forces that could mercilessly deprive humans of their existence. The rider stood on the great path of destruction, promising not only physical death, but also the loss of hope and faith in a brighter future. The second rider wore. His arrival came with whirlwinds and crackling, as if the earth itself resisted his presence. He personified devastation and bloodshed, bringing chaos and ruthless annihilation. War was clad in armor, stained with blood and dust, symbolizing battles and conflicts along his path. His sword pierced hearts of victims with relentless fury, leaving behind only ravaged lands and lost lives. The rider rode on a fiery horse, commanding the flames to his will, leaving behind fires and destruction wherever his hooves trod. Under his influence, people forgot about peace and love. Their hearts became vile and filled with a thirst for blood. Madness overwhelmed reason, and the world turned into an arena of death and suffering. Cities ignited, and fields turned into graves. Mournful cries and moans became the song of war, heralding his merciless presence. What was even more terrifying, war affected not only the physical shell, but also the souls of people. Unleashing discord and hatred, he awakened in the hearts of humanity the darkest and most bestial instincts. Friendship and solidarity were overshadowed by betrayal and blood feuds. The rider of war plunged the world into chaos and madness, where no soul remained unharmed. The third rider, Famine. His arrival was accompanied by the raspy whisper of hunger, the terrifying grinding of bones, and the cursed hungry eyes that awaited their prey. Famine, emaciated and devoid of humanity, condemned the world to unbearable agony and perdition. His presence in the dead silence devastated everything around. The earth cracked and rivers dried up, leaving no drop of sustenance for the desperate beings seeking hope. Famine, with a bitter smirk on his face, devoured all living things, consuming them in his insatiable thirst. His hollow eyes bore witness to the need for satisfaction, a power that defied any law. He hunted humans, devouring their flesh and bones with infernal hunger, sparing no one and nothing. His presence instilled terror, and no one could hide from his predatory shadow. Under the influence of famine, people became emaciated bodies tormented by hunger and despair. Their strength dwindled, and the hope of salvation evaporated like water in a desert. They became swords, killing each other for the last crumb of bread, and their souls transformed into scorched wastelands devoid of any spark of light. The fourth rider, Death. His arrival was accompanied by the dreadful creaking of blades and flickering shadows on the ground. He personified finality and annihilation, and his presence carried dreadful tidings of impending doom. The cold gaze of the rider lacked human compassion and instead displayed indifference towards the suffering of the living. His eyes were devoid of any light, as if scorching cold seeped through them, and his unwavering blade awaited its victims. As death approached, living creatures felt their strength leaving their bodies, and their breath became fragile and faint. Like an invisible virus, the rider penetrated every cell of the organism, feeding on the essence of life. His touch left behind only decay and emptiness. Abandoned souls wandered in the afterlife, lost and devoid of strength, their shadows disappearing into infinity. Death's blade, distorted from countless killings, never wavered, never tired of its continuous harvest of souls. Where death passed, only empty husks of bodies remained, destined to fade away and decompose. People fell into despair, knowing that no life could escape his cold touch. Seeing his power and relentlessness was like feeling the breath of decay on one's neck. And yet, perhaps one day, in the depths of suffering, people would begin to see the true essence of death. They would realize that his presence carried not only destruction, but also the possibility of liberation from the shackles of life. Within his dark shell could lie an unknown secret of transition into a new existence, of eternity and one's own place in the afterlife. With each step, the horsemen approached the completion of their grim mission. Their dark shadows spread across the earth, overshadowing light and hope. They were invulnerable and unbeatable, and humanity stood on the brink of total annihilation. But suddenly, in the darkness of despair, a glimmer of hope emerged. An ancient legend spoke of a forgotten artifact capable of restraining the horsemen in their pursuit. It was the Apocalypse Key, hidden deep within the earth. The fate of the world hung by a thread, and only time would reveal whether humanity could stop the forces of apocalypse, or be plunged into the abyss of eternal darkness. The dark figures of the horsemen instilled trembling and horror, but in the agonizing darkness, questions arose. Perhaps not everything was as it seemed. Perhaps the horsemen were mere instruments in the hands of humanity itself, driven by their own passions and thirst for power. Perhaps it was humans who were truly killing themselves and others. Such thoughts infiltrated the minds of the heroes, touched by the madness of the horsemen. What if the true evil resided in human nature, in the fact that each person was capable of the most heinous deeds fueled by their own desires? What if the horsemen were merely catalysts, bringing forth the dark aspects of the human soul? Unanswered questions raged in their minds, and they realized that the salvation from total destruction could only come from battling not only the external horrors, but also the inner demons of each individual. Ira Torres, a young and inquisitive girl, was a passionate explorer of occult secrets. In her quest to delve into the world of enigmas and forbidden knowledge, she came across mentions of an abandoned mansion known as the House of Darkness. Legends spoke of this place being saturated with mystical energy and carrying a sinister reputation. One day, Ira decided to explore the house on her own, hoping to unravel its mysteries and discover the truth hidden behind its dark walls. Venturing out into the edge of the night, she infiltrated the forbidden abode, navigating through cobweb-covered hallways and ominous rooms. The mansion greeted her with its eerie presence. Walls covered in dust and shadows seemed to breathe with their own life. Ira's footsteps echoed through the corridors, and the pale blue lamp she brought with her cast a murky glow, awakening the ghosts of past grandeur. However, as she approached the heart of the mansion, the doors closed behind her with a creak as if commanded by an invisible force, trapping her inside. It seemed as though the world outside had rejected her, and she became a prisoner of this ominous ruin. The girl found herself locked in a dungeon, and her only path to salvation was to explore the mansion itself in search of an exit. But the further she progressed, the stronger the feeling grew that the house had a life of its own, testing her resilience. Sinister sounds penetrated through the stone walls, as if whispers from a host of otherworldly entities. Ira felt an unseen force mysteriously interacting with her consciousness. Visions and dark fantasies engulfed her, causing her to doubt reality and imprison her thoughts in a never-ending loop. The abandoned mansion became the embodiment of her own fears and unresolved mysteries. Everything within it, from the old furniture to the ominous portraits, was woven from dreams and nightmares, embodying the horrors awaiting her in this forgotten cavern. It all began with excruciating headaches, piercing her skull as if thousands of needles were piercing her brain. Ira screamed in pain, but the agony only intensified. Suddenly, a bottomless well of fear and darkness opened up in her consciousness, revealing disconnected visions detached from reality. Grim images slowly materialized before her eyes, scenes of death and destruction, suffering and hopelessness. Terrifying creatures beyond comprehension paraded in her mind, unleashing their power and madness upon her. She felt the touch of cold, slippery flesh emanating from these eerie beings, as if they wanted to enter her, to penetrate her very essence. With each new vision, Ira plunged deeper into the abyss of horror and insanity. She saw future events, foretold death and destruction. The horrifying truth reflected in her eyes, an unpalatable reality that couldn't be accepted or understood. Bright colors and joyful images gave way to gloomy shades and menacing forms. Ira felt her soul shattering under the weight of these mysterious knowledge. She struggled with her visions, trying to reject this accursed gift that only brought her torment and suffering. But the more she resisted, the stronger the visions penetrated her consciousness, consuming her entirely. Ira realized that this gift of clairvoyance was a curse that would haunt her until the end. She had come to know too much, to see too much, and it forever changed her life. Now she was trapped in a dark labyrinth of visions and fear, unable to escape her fate. Outside the mansion, the night grew even darker, and the moon cast sinister shadows on the moss-covered walls. Ira discovered that the keys to the doors had vanished, as if dissolved in the air, depriving her of her last chance at freedom. But she didn't give up. The old, half-ruined walls trembled with ancient secrets hidden in their depths. Dust and cobwebs lay everywhere, as if time had stood still in this gloomy place. Advancing through the labyrinth of rooms and corridors, Ira suddenly heard a noise coming from one of the rooms. Fearless in the face of danger, she resolutely opened the door and found a peculiar artifact on an old table. It was an ancient carved mask adorned with mysterious symbols. Ira couldn't resist the temptation and decided to put on the mask, but something happened at that moment. Her consciousness was transported into the past, to an era when the mansion was still new and alive.